Ooh.
Welcome to MBA PodTV. I'm your host, Dilany Fernando. The Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania is one of the nation's top business schools. Last year, they received over 7,500 applications and matriculated 850. Although Wharton is one of the biggest programs in the country, it's also clearly one of the most competitive. Today, we'll be taking you behind the scenes of Wharton to find out more about the program and what they look for in a candidate. Joining us is Kofi Kankam, a Wharton MBA alumnus and director of Admit Advantage, a global MBA admissions consulting company. You'll also hear directly from a Wharton admissions director, a current student, and a recent alumnus. So stay with us as we share with you how to get into Wharton.
Wharton celebrates its financial heritage. It is probably, I'm a little bit biased, but I think it probably is the best finance school in the world. Certainly it's amongst the top 2 or top 3. But it's not just finance. You really can't be a school that's sort of as highly ranked as Wharton without being strong across the board. So marketing is really significant at the school, the marketing major. I think the marketing faculty is the most published faculty in the world. There are a number of students that engage in the real estate program, and they bring a number of key, really strong speakers like Sam Zell's come to speak, Donald Trump, etc. There's an MBA in healthcare management. People pursue that if they're going to do potentially banking in finance, or if they're going to work for a biopharmaceutical, biotechnology company. That's a relevant major as well. It's a diverse program. There really isn't a set type of student that they look for, but they want candidates that are aggressive, ambitious, and really good people.
At Wharton, we teach in 3 different ways. We teach from lecture-style coursework, we teach from casework, and we also teach from experiential learning. So for our students, that kind of variation and the exposure to all 3 different styles becomes really important to them. Additionally, I think the passion around abstract thinking about abstract problems that don't necessarily have a clear solution, and really kind of puzzling through those things. I think the enjoyment of that, the enjoyment of the analytical piece, is something that really signifies that a student would probably enjoy themselves here, and probably has that kind of extra added passion around intellectualism that would really make them thrive.
Wharton itself is extremely fast-paced, and it's a lot. The way it was described to me was kind of drinking out of a fire hose, and that's definitely true. Everything at Wharton comes at you rapid pace, and you really just have to accept that early on. But with that being said, the culture here and the people that are here are just so supportive. People will take time out of their day to whether sit down and mock interview you, or give you an impromptu tutor session on for an exam that we're about to have.
One thing that's very unique about Wharton is how engaged the students are in their campus, and how much leadership and initiative and how empowered the students are. There's a model that we use here called co-production, and that the students really shape the learning experience, the extracurricular experience, the entire MBA student experience.
Leadership is really critical. I mean, Wharton's looking for people that have had sort of an entrepreneurial attitude, whether or not they've been entrepreneurs or worked in big companies. They want people that try to run things. They want people that are pushing themselves, that try to leave a legacy. The school is known to be very student-run, which is a little bit atypical to other schools. So, for example, if you want to run a conference at Wharton, some other schools, they'll have a full-time conference coordinator on the school's payroll. Wharton doesn't have that. They also want people that are sort of civically or community-oriented in terms of making a contribution. Too often, applicants applying to a school like Wharton or HBS or Stanford or schools of that caliber think about what they're going to receive from the program and never really stop and think about what they're going to offer and how they're going to make it a better environment, enhance their classmates' experiences. People think of Wharton as kind of probably a cutthroat school to a certain extent, but it's really not like that. It is competitive, although it's probably more competitive at the undergraduate level. I think at the MBA level, the hardest thing is probably getting in. But there really is a focus on teamwork. Everything is team-centered. From the clubs you run to finding a group of people that are trying to find similar employment opportunities upon graduation, to a learning team that you're assigned to in your first year, that you do all your group work with academically. It's very centered on teams. And I think you'll see that sort of the essay questions they're asking this year have a lot of team dynamic elements for that purpose. They want to see how people react in teams. They don't really want lone wolves. It's not that kind of environment.
I tried to highlight that I was someone who was coming from a nonprofit, sort of social change background, and I was someone who was committed to returning to that in the long term. And I did kind of specifically point that out. I knew at the time that I was applying that Dean Tom Robertson had just come on board, and it was something he really cared about making Wharton a place where students were trained to be a force for good. I highlighted that, and I think identified that I understood where Wharton was in its evolution as a school that fostered social change and social impact, and I understood how I would fit into that community. I also, I think, highlighted the amount of experience that I'd had and the diversity of the experiences that I had. For example, I did choose to write some of my essays about some of the extracurricular activities I did, mentoring underprivileged children in Washington, D.C. And I think that was one way to show that not only was I a passionate, leader, great team worker and manager in the workplace, but that I also definitely had a passion for empowering young people and education, even outside of work.
Of course, no one is perfect. We all have things that we wish were stronger on our application. Maybe it's your GPA or your GMAT or a few extracurriculars that you wish you could throw on that resume. Believe me, you're not the only one. Let's hear more about this from Kathryn Bezella.
First of all, when addressing a weakness, an applicant should not ignore it. All of us are really trained to look at a file and to notice the things that may not be so strong, or the kind of elephant in the room. If the applicant doesn't address it head on, it's usually not a smart move, because the admissions committee then has the kind of imaginative power to assume that the mistake might have really had a big impact, or that the reason the recommender isn't included in the file is because they really felt their current boss doesn't like them, or something along those lines. So we really always want students to tell us directly what the weakness might be, so they show good self-awareness by acknowledging it and by taking it and really making it into something purposeful in the application. That said, I think students are a little bit misguided at sometimes when they think about, oh, my GPA wasn't so perfect, or this aspect of my file really feels probably like it's not good. Well, I think that the misconception is that we're looking for perfect students. We're not. We recognize that mistakes, if they've been handled well, if you've learned from something, that knowledge can really be an exceptional addition to the classroom experience here at Wharton. So I think by tackling something head on, by really explaining what happened, showing us how you've learned from it, we can also then see how you would bring that learning into our community, and sometimes that can be a real strength instead of a weakness.
Before you actually tackle any application, you probably should list a set of the leadership characteristics that you have that you can credibly demonstrate. So when you think of leaders that you respect, they usually have some unifying characteristics. And so as an applicant, you should really think about what you can obviously show in your background. So maybe it's being a great communicator, maybe it's being innovative, maybe it's being adaptive, maybe it's being able to make decisions with limited information. Maybe it's being community service minded. You want to think of those traits and really make sure they're emphasized across your essays, across your recommendations, and across your interviews. And then you want to think of stories, experiences, and accomplishments which showcase those traits. And a good application will have a mix of personal and professional stories. So it won't just be things you've done at work. It might be, leading some sort of religious center, mentoring a kid, dealing with a family emergency. We had a gentleman we worked with a few years ago who had to become the man of his family because his dad got cancer when he was in high school. And the dad ended up passing away, and the student in college had to move back to New York and basically become the man of the family, work 30, 40 hours a week. And he wrote about that, how that really shaped his experience and gave him a certain laser-like focus that he didn't have before. And that was the focus he was bringing to his career currently and what he was going to do after school. So there are always opportunities to bring these things in, but typically you want to think about the leadership characteristics, and you want to bring in some personal stories as well, not just corporate work stories.
Thanks for spending time with us, and I hope you've learned a little bit more about Wharton and how to create a strong application. That's it for this episode of MBA PodTV. I'm your host, Delaney Fernando. Visit us at mbapodcaster.com to register for weekly audio and video shows. Join us on Facebook and Twitter to keep up to date with the latest news and insights on your MBA application process.